Hi everyone. So I welcome you all to the class of business to business marketing, and today we are going to talk about a new unit, so which is demand forecasting. Now, what is forecasting, and why forecasting is important? I think it is very simple to understand that a good forecast can be very helpful for the company to in the growth of the company, and if it is a poor forecasting, then it may result in serious losses to any company. Now, be it a B2B, B2C does not matter. The challenge with B2B is more in the sense because it is due to the characteristics of the product, right, in the B2B market. Forecasting becomes a little challenging. Why? One simple reason is that B2B market, the products have a derived demand. So, derived demand means when we say, suppose let us say when a car sells, right. So, there are so many parts which are attached to the car, right. Now, those products will only sell if there is a sales of cars, right. So, the car, it is dependent on the sales of cars, and so this kind of joint demand, having a derived demand approach makes B2B forecasting slightly complicated. For example, let us say now the manufacturer of a tube, let us say medicine tube. Now, how many should I produce if a B2B marketer? The B2B marketer, obviously his role is to produce the B2B, the tube, right, and then that tube may be used by a pharmaceutical company to sell its medicine. Now, the question here is how much of sales is the pharmaceutical company having, right, or it is making. So, that will decide how many tubes will it demand, and thus how many tubes should the company, that means the producer B2B company should produce, right. So, the B2B demand is directly somewhere related with the demand from the consumer end. How much of consumer demand is there, that will have a reflection on what kind of a demand forecasting will the B2B marketer do. Okay. Now, forecasting is predicting the future, right. Now, sometimes we look at the future and we try to determine what will happen to me, right. For example, in the last few years we had a tough time when COVID was there and the demand for products was coming down like anything. Now, that not only resulted in the demand for all kinds of products and services. So, as consumer demand for products decreased, that had a direct impact on the business marketers who were building B2B products. So, that also had a great impact, and the amount of uncertainty that revolves in the market is sincerely is very high, right. So, if you see new technologies coming up, new substitutes coming up in the market. So, how would a company, so uncertainty can be for the industry, uncertainty can be for the company. So, for example, if the industry, let us say, finds that a new technology is coming into place, so the industry might get affected on the whole. On the other hand, it could be a individual firm, right. So, the individual firm can get affected by its competitors, the substitutes, right, whatever can come. So, that can also impact the companies. So, demand forecasting is the process of understanding and predicting this consumer demand, the customer demand, and how the question is then, that means if we are going to predict the customer demand and the consumer behavior, the patterns are all changing with time, right. So, people in the market, their buying behavior, everything is changing. So, in such a situation, how difficult it is to predict the future, right. That is what we are going to discuss in this forecasting unit. Let us see some poor cases of forecasting. Now, Steve Ballmer, who was the CEO of Microsoft, he made a prediction about Apple iPhones, and he said Apple iPhone is the most expensive phone in the world and it does not appeal to business customers because it does not have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine, right. Now, just imagine, today Apple, we all know, is the largest, one of the largest selling companies, phones, and iPhone has a very huge demand, and this company has become the most innovative and the best company in the world, right. So, a man like Steve Ballmer, who was heading Microsoft, now could not even predict what would be the future of iPhone, right. Let us take a few more examples. In the 60s, the US, the Business Week, one of the popular magazines, said that Japanese cars in the US would not succeed, they would fail. What did they say? With over 50 foreign cars already on sale here, the Japanese auto industry isn't likely to carve out a big slice of the US market. And we all know what happened then, right? Japanese car makers, they invaded the US market and they increased their sales tremendously. Another interesting prediction or forecasting was by Daryl Januck. So, what did he say? This is a movie producer who said on the future of televisions, and he said television won't last because people will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night. And he said this to 20th Century Fox in 1946. And then what happened? Today, I think in almost every home we have at least one television or even more than that, right. The last and very interesting is a university professor on the said something on the demand for overnight parcel delivery. What his quote was, he said, the concept is interesting, he told it to his student, the concept is interesting and well formed, but in order to earn a better grade than C, that means C is a very poor grade, right, A, B, C. So, C is not a good grade. He said if you want to earn a better grade than C, then the idea must be feasible. This was in response to Fred Smith's university professor. Fred Smith actually happens to be, if you do not know, Fred Smith was the founder of FedEx, right. So, it was his proposal, right, his one of his academic work, in which he had made this proposal of reliable overnight delivery service. And Smith later found FedEx and he created history after that. So, sometimes people who are into education, who have a knowledge and who are from the industry, who have very clear idea about the market, they do tremendous errors in forecasting. So, forecasting is not that easy, it is a challenge, but then we have to somewhere try to control it. Otherwise, what will happen, we will be playing on gut feeling, that is like taking a chance, which can be very dangerous for a company. So, this is a case. Now, if you see every day Amazon, right, is one of the most popular brands in the world, easily one of the most popular brands. So, this retailer has moved from becoming only a retail company to today it has become a data management company, right. It has a huge amount of data, right. If I am not wrong, it is almost the highest amount of data it stores with it. So, it has various services now, Amazon Fresh, Amazon Kindle, Amazon Prime and many more, right. Amazon web services. So, what exactly do this does this company do, and we are not talking about it as Amazon as a retailer, but we talk about this AWS, right. So, if you see AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, they provide services to almost many companies like Meesho, More Quality Swiggy, Axiom Telecom, AffordableTours.com. So, they work as consulting partners for them and they help them in understanding the demand forecasting for these companies. Okay. And this is not all, this is just a small number of customers from AWS. So, this actual list may be very, very huge. So, what is Amazon doing here? What is Amazon doing in this case? Now, Amazon is helping these companies in creating forecasting models. So, forecasting is the answer for what Amazon is doing, right, forecasting for these web based businesses. So, how does Amazon do that? So, let us see this. Now, Amazon, if you see, has historical data. So, it takes from the sales, web traffics, inventory, numbers, cash flow, etc. all this data. So, they have this data and then they collect data like for example, holidays, product descriptions, promotions. They try to use this data together and they upload it their historical and related data to the Amazon forecast. So, a company Suppose for example, whatever data it has got, let us say we take the case of Misho. Now, Misho will upload their historical data into the Amazon web services in the cloud, and then Amazon will help them in forecasting. So, Amazon forecast automatically inspects the data, identifies the key attributes and selects right algorithms needed for forecasting. Then it trains and optimizes your custom model. So, whatever model the companies are following at this moment, Amazon will try to improve upon that. And then as an output they give you the customized forecasting model, right. So, Amazon generates this customized forecasting model. So, the output can be visualized in a console, or it can be in the CSV format. So, you can collect this output and use it for your decision making process. So, this service that Amazon is giving has been helpful to several companies around the globe, including retailers, pharmaceutical industry, FMCG companies, what not, right. And anybody who is on the web, they are finding it extremely useful. Okay. So, I am not promoting for Amazon, but Amazon is doing it, right. So, let us see a clear definition of forecasting now. Forecasting is a technique that uses historical data as inputs to make informed estimates that are predicted in determining the future trends. So, where is the future trend moving? How, what is the new trend in the market? What consumers are demanding and what do they expect from the marketer? So, forecasting helps us to give that idea. Okay. And so, a poor forecasting will obviously be dangerous, and a good forecasting will reduce this uncertainty and give us a direction to move. Now, some examples for forecasting, which how forecasting helps is finding the profitability. So, we can forecast what would be the next year's profitability for the company. Now, how are we doing it? Depending on several attributes, several variables, we will decide how much of profit can the company make. Demand forecast is something that is extremely crucial to any company. So, any company that manufactures something or the other, right, would like to know what kind of demand it will generate in the next coming for the annual year. Now, here forecasting becomes very important because you can use your past data, for example, last 5 years data, 10 years data, 20 years data, and then maybe the recent data is always better. So, you can take and try to extrapolate into the future what next would be the demand for the coming year. So, by understanding this kind of data, that is this kind of demand, the company can accordingly try to create an infrastructure, supply chain mechanism, so that in the right moment they have the adequate necessary things. Okay. It also helps to determine the inventory forecast. So, how much of each raw material that is required to produce the output, how much it is there with us and how much would be required. So, that inventory forecast is done by in this forecasting process. And web traffic forecast is how many people would, for example, like visit my site, how many of them would be, what time of the day they would visit, which gender would be more visiting my let us say website, what kind of events are important for the customers, the potential customers. So, every small detailed information, it helps us to understand the future, right. So, that's web traffic forecasting is also important, and this has become very relevant in today's world, and especially for markets which are like B2B markets, where it has become important to understand that what kind of traffic come to my website, and how much time they spend, what kind of activities do they do on the website. So, every information becomes very important, so that engagement and all things are very important for the marketer to understand them. Demand forecasting is a tool used for predicting future demand, as I said, right, based on the past demand information. So, here you can see, for example, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, and here we want to know what is the, let us say, demand that would be in the last month. So, from taking these values, maybe we can determine, right, okay, the value, the demand for the last month could be somewhere here. Okay. So, this is just an example, right. So, demand forecasting is done through this way. The question is, demand for products and services is usually uncertain. Now, that word uncertain is a very key word. So, forecasting is used for strategic planning, finance and accounting budgets, production and operation, marketing, everywhere. So, since this uncertainty is prevalent in the market and we do not know how people would behave, what would be in demand, what products will come into the market, because trying to understand the market, trying to understand what the competitors are doing, how much of R&D is being done, what new products might be coming up in the future and what effect that will have on my products. All these are the uncertainties always prevalent in the market. How sensitive are people to prices, right? If I change the price, what will impact, what impact will make on my product demand, all these important points. So, a proper forecasting is used for strategic planning as it is mentioned here. So, the company can decide what can be the future strategies. For example, you see, if a company wants to invest in a new plant which is a 10-year-old, let us say at least a 10-year time period they have to think, right. And suppose they realize that they are not able to estimate the demand properly, how, on what ground can they invest in the company's capacity expansion? So, that is a challenge, they cannot do it. So, that is where forecasting is very helpful. And if you do not have, let us say you do not have the necessary infrastructure and suddenly the market there is a demand, then you may miss out, you cannot participate in the market demand. So, that is a loss the company will have to bear. So, that is why if you have forecasted well, then it can be highly beneficial. So, similarly finance and accounting budget, how much of money has to be kept for promotion, how much for capacity expansion, how much for product R&D, all this has to be is very helpful. Similarly, production and operation, as I said, and marketing. So, understanding the consumer behavior, what kind of behavioral changes consumers are going through, what demands might come into in the future. So, all these are the different necessities that or the important points that forecasting helps us to achieve. Okay. What are the key issues in forecasting? So, when you are doing forecasting, as we have said, you are trying to reduce the uncertainty. If I say in a simple term, forecasting is a method, if I have to define, forecasting is a method of reducing the uncertainty and giving it a direction. So, a forecast is only as good as the information included in the forecast, which is the past data, right. So, a future forecast will be dependent on the past data that is available to here, right. History is not a perfect predictor of the future. Sometimes, let us say in the past you must have seen certain companies have not performed well for a long time period. Let us say the chemical industry in India was going through a lull period for a long period of time. But in the last, if you see from 2000 and 10 onwards, 10, 11 or let us say last decade, chemical companies have exceedingly performed, have done extremely well, right. And you can see so many different chemical companies who have performed extremely well in the market. So, history may not be a perfect predictor, but then you can't even ignore history, because obviously history, we take the value from of the past from history only. So, forecasting is based on assumption that the past predicts the future, and when forecasting, think carefully whether or not the past is strongly related to what you expect to see in the future. Now, for example, now after COVID, you see many companies, for example, India has started its drive on semiconductor development, right. Now, that was unheard of in India, but now the world saw that dependence on China is becoming a major issue, right. At least in the COVID times they found that. So, they needed a 1+ strategy, is besides China, another market that could support them. So, now taking this advantage, India is now planning to have its own obviously semiconductor industry. So, now they have there is one Foxconn has tied up with Vedanta, and now they are planning to set up. Many more players might come. Obviously, this is a very huge capital expensive intensive industry. So, it is not easy, but still there would be many players would show interest. Even the Tatas had shown interest to be in this business, but slowly we will find that, right. Now, let us see. Now, this is a small example. So, can you see this? For example, these are the data of different months. So, the sales of Audi, right, has been given. So, can we predict from here what would be the sales of July? Can we predict by looking, ignore this part, just look at this data. So, by looking at this data, can I predict the data for the month of July? Yes, I can. Okay. If I have this data, can I predict the sales of Audi another version by looking at the sales of this version, this version? Maybe I can. It depends on what kind of similarity is prevalent in these two models. If the similarity in the model, right, and in the model and similarity in the market, they are catering to, maybe I can, at least if I have no data, it is at least better to have some data, right. Maybe it is partially correct, but at least we are better off in a position when we have no data, right. So, it helps us to understand the market, sensitizes us. So, can we predict the new model based on the data in the table? Maybe. We need to consider how much of the two markets have in common. Okay. So, what makes a good forecast? First of all, it should be timely, right. Forecasting is only helpful if you have in the right time. After the time has passed by, if you get a good forecasting report, it is of no use. It should be accurate as possible, as accurate. So, nobody is claiming here that it can be 100% accurate, because you are dealing with a real life situation. So, at least if you are close, even 60% is not bad, because you are much ahead than 20% or 30%. It should be reliable, the data has to be reliable, and it should be in meaningful units. If you give a forecasted value, what units you are using, you should be very clear. You should not be using something which makes it complicated or unnecessarily not readable or understandable. It should be presented in writing also, right, and the method should be easy to use and understand in most cases. So, if these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind while making a good forecast. What are the basically types of forecasting methods? We use two methods, one is the qualitative method and the quantitative method. So, the quantitative method depends on data and analytical techniques. So, we will see that, and the qualitative methods basically live on subjective opinions from experts and kind of people who are who know the subject and they have worked in the field. So, if you look at quantitative forecasting methods, there are some methods like trend projection, regression analysis, correlation analysis, input output analysis, and some econometric models. Okay. Basically, we largely look at historical methods, weighted moving, smoothing, exponential kind of methods, regression, correlation. So, all these are different methods which are used by marketers to forecast the future. Okay. So, quantitative methods have their own advantage, but again they can go wrong, because as we said, sometimes the past does not exactly determine the future, because in between something might have happened in the environment or in the political geopolitical scenario or something. So, it is difficult. So, to work upon that, what we do is we may use a qualitative forecasting method, which is for example like Delphi technique, panel consensus, historical analogy, Salesforce composite, and market research techniques. So, by using these kind of techniques, what the researcher or the company manager can do is they can understand that what changes have happened, which mathematically it is difficult to place or understand it, because you might not be having any tangible value for that, but some subjective knowledge of people or experts from the field can be brought into this, and that can be utilized to balance out the uncertainties that has recently happened. For example, now if you look at only data, so maybe the if and you do not take into account the COVID situation or the recession that had happened in the past. If you do not consider this, then you would feel that as if the data has suddenly plunged. So, we have to understand if it has plunged, why it has plunged, and will this scenario stay for more time or it will go away. So, this will be actually helpful, and this can be only understood by speaking to experts from the field or taking a survey of people who are relevant to us. So, with all this kind of methods, a company can easily forecast what it can do in the future, right. So, in the next class we will continue in detail about this qualitative and quantitative methods of forecasting. Till then, take care and thank you very much.